Welcome, Elder Dennis Joseph. How are you doing and where are you from?
This beautiful day. I am an elder from the Squamish Nation and I reside in Humulchison Village.
Tell me about your family and how you've been involved with the nation.
I am the third generation to be speaking this language. My grandfather, Andrew Paul, was the first, handpicked along with 8 other people in his generation to go work with the French nuns and priests. They were sent by the elders as opposed to being forced to go. It was also during the residential school mandate, but they were handpicked. They were visionaries who saw change coming. My ancestral name is Quitchtall.
And what does that mean?
Quitchtall was the name of the serpent that ancestors slayed many years ago. 7 generations from me, I received the name through ceremony through Percy Paul. I'm grateful and thankful when he announced to me, riding with him to Soul Carvings, he said, I'm going to be receiving his name. And I said to him, Uncle, I have 32 cousins. He said, I know. We talked about it for years and we chose you. Then he said, I chose you. So we planned for just about a year inviting people to ceremony. And because the ancestors slayed the serpent, the people, the family, gave him the name of the serpent, embracing the power.
How old were you when you were gifted your name?
27. Yeah, I was already on council back then. I served there for 28 years, worked for Squamish for 40. It was a good age to be receiving that name.
How long were you on council and how did you feel about being on council?
I felt I was groomed to do that kind of work. Growing up around all of the colonial history that my grandfather and my father and mom talked about in the kitchen, the residential school system, the land grab that was taken from us, like Snouk and many other areas that were taken. So I grew up around all of that in a political environment, but also balanced with our language, our culture, our storytelling, which is so vital to learn as a young boy and young man, still learning.
So, do you feel like you have led your life in a good way and been instrumental in raising the spirits of us Squamish Nation people?
Yes, I inherited a role supporting our families in times of loss, but also a traditionally trained speaker for our ceremonies that we have, from birth to celebrations of life and everything in between. And watching many elders and matriarchs do that work, my uncle passed that work on to me. So taking all of that spirit and carrying it on in a good way has been, to me, a high honor, and keeping that name alive. I'm just the caretaker of the name. I passed it on to my son last year. Yeah, I'm grateful to do that. The transparency issue is so important in terms of leadership for Squamish people. It has always been there. I recall with this existing council, I spoke to them as a witness at Totem Hall, where they encouraged and implored that they would be transparent to the people. We're very lucky to be invited, or quite a process to be on a council agenda. Even at our general meetings, it's very difficult. You're allotted 2 minutes to speak. We've come a long way from consensus building for Squamish people, which was the historical way leadership was done by our elders of the day. They were longshoremen, fishermen, etc., but they also sat at council, and through consensus, they would talk for hours until there was consensus to work towards a given issue and move a given issue forward. We've come a long way, and there's pretty much zero in terms of passing on the baton to generations. As a young man, I sat in council meetings all the time and just sat there and listened and learned from all those old people, hereditary leadership into now the democratic leadership that we have today. And that transparency issue is a challenge. Not that I don't understand safety. Even when I sat on council as leadership, we were always put at risk as leaders, but that's nothing to hide behind. There is technology that's available to show people how we're doing things and how we're moving forward collectively, and it's not being done through our status card numbers or member numbers. We can all confidentially log in and see what's going on, and appreciate the concern today with safety for leadership, but also understand that there's technology to show our people how we're moving forward in an open and transparent way. That to me is vital because we're not teaching our young people how to move forward in this world today in the settler model. But also what often came forward in those meetings was historical knowledge, ways of being, especially with those old people to share our values, our customs, our tradition. And that's important, our custom system that we're living under now. Varied interpretations, but the custom is we've moved from hereditary system to a democratic system that passed by 2%, 1980. And to me, those that followed after, if they were not hereditary leaders, they certainly were direct members of hereditary leaders. Now it's very narrow. It can be perceived as very narrow with so-called conflicts of interest. If the settler model is on top, our cultural model is on the bottom. What they both have in common is ways to sort out conflict by talking. And we're not even hearing how that's sorted out. And we need to sort it out as a collective people, as Squamish people, how we deal with conflict. And that's important to me. Having sat there many times and being perceived as conflict, if I had that perception, I would just leave the room. And always with a collective interest in mind. That's important. Be seen is important to today's leadership, so we can all hear. My uncle always said we have eyes we can see, we have ears we can hear. So do our families. They know what's going on. They see what's going on, and they're upset about it. And they express it in different ways, sometimes healthily, sometimes silently, and sometimes very vocally. It's not often I sit here as an elder to say something is show yourselves. Show what you're working towards your ancestral names if you don't have one. Show us who you really are. Don't be behind the model, the settler model, which is on top. And that to me is a concern as an elder, that the settler model has been parachuted on top of our traditional model, and it's taking over. Because the backbone historically has been our staff, our people. I can look back at Captain Cook's model, who said of all the indigenous people in his travels, Captain James Cook, the Squamish people were the toughest negotiators. And we carried that tradition on. We still carry it on. But I'm here to ask you as leadership to open your eyes, open your ears, and let's go back to 16. Let's carry on that tradition as leadership. Let's not erase ourselves and let that model take over, because they don't know. I've implored many leadership who are non-Indigenous in the hopes of mandating our non-Indigenous staff to be taught some of this history, because they're blind, they don't see. They didn't learn the stuff that we learned in school. They didn't learn the stuff that we know in our hearts and minds and are healing from. And from those meetings I've been at, some of them don't care. Some do, not all, but those that don't want to learn, there's the door. And if you don't want to learn, there's the door. If you're willing to be an ally, show yourselves. Thank you.
So do you feel that colonization has too much of a stronghold within our council, and that there needs to be a better balance between business and remembering our culture and our ancestors and doing things in a good way? Is that an area where you'd like to really see council take a look at and remember where they come from?
Truly, I am concerned the way it's going now. Even though we have people with MBAs, bachelors, and we're eventually going to be talking billions of dollars. But I think the balance of those not knowing over time will overtake us. There's a lofty term called extinguishment. We should not be extinguishing ourselves at the expense of the colonial model. We've been battling it for generations. The collective minds of our ancestors are carried in our heart, our minds, and our blood. And they're not going to understand it until we teach them. And I believe we have an opportunity to show this world who we truly are. as Indigenous people to look after this Mother Earth, to look after billions of dollars in a healthy way, and everything in between. Because some say we're on a crash course with Mother Earth. But as we're building financially, there's room for everybody. There's room for everybody, no matter where they're at the educational scale. There's room to mandate, to mentor, to build together, especially the majority of our youth. And I call upon the youth of this nation to begin that process of learning, to understand how we got here, because it's your future we're talking about. That's vital.
So currently we have 8 people on council, and 3 are of the same family. Do you believe that that's a bit of a conflict of interest? And could you explain to me why 16 council members is better?
I believe, 3 is a conflict of interest, especially in the colonial model, because we simply don't know what's moving forward. And just to have it out there, out of mind for membership is a challenge. And what is being concerning is not knowing from the balance of those 3 or the balance of the 5, however you want to look at it. The not knowing is hurtful and painful to understand, because the challenges that are before the balance of council can be concerning, and we don't know the balance of the 3 that may, 1 or 2 may step out of the room, or all 3. Again, back to 16, I think moving that direction is what I would love to see, going back to 16. And it doesn't matter where you're from. We need to move away from the system that doesn't belong to us in our custom. How we voted for the top 16 is important to adhere to. I have family everywhere, so-called on and off reserve. We have in our traditional territory off reserve over 1,000 people. They have a mandate, they have a concern, they have a vote. It should concern the top 16 who want to put their name in a hat and put their best foot forward in the collective interest of all of our people, not just 8. And there's enough work to go around. When I was there was a lot of work to go around. It doesn't need to be farmed out to consultants. Consultants are vital in this important world, but not so many that it outweighs the work of the 8 or 16. We're there to do the work in our culturally appropriate way, spiritually appropriate way, so our people can see that.
So would you like to see the zone system regarding elections removed?
I would like it removed with support of all people. There was a bit of a snake in the grass with regard to the survey, the 2 years that it took to get to that referendum. I also understand there was 16 lawyers supposedly that had input into that process, and lawyers will essentially, end of the day, give you opportunity, but they'll say what a given individual or group will want. And that's what I'm hearing out there. And back at that time, any leadership council didn't have a say in what that process was. It was at arm's length, a mile's length. Couldn't even talk about it at the table without being reprimanded. It's a bit different now. That's concerning.
Is one of your main worries the imbalance of power?
The way I would like to see it improved is through getting rid of one person's mandate and running with that self-mandate. What I'm hearing is there's some who would take that personal mandate and run with it at the behest of the balance of council. So that is concerning. And to live under that system and hiding behind that survey is not the way. And it's a deviation from our custom, where in my time, 16 chose a chairperson or chairpersons. They also chose spokesperson or spokepersons. And that deviation, running from even under the Indian Act, let's say you could have an elected chief, or for Squamish, it was a custom election where we chose who was going to be our spokespeople, who's going to be our chairman, who's going to run with the agenda. And to the best of our ability through communications, we did that and informed the people. Never enough hours in the day with the social issues, the business issues, and always best efforts. But yeah, getting back to the perception, the reality, it's a challenge to watch somebody with one mandate move forward at the behest of council and at the behest of our people. That needs to change.
A lot of elders and people are afraid to speak up.
It is, in some ways, the residential school system all over again. And to hide behind that should not be on. For those who continue to support community in the front lines, should be less concerned than those who are hiding behind the fence or behind the bush, as it were. Because when you're out there and doing the work, we're the third generation of survivors. And through all of that collective thinking, we've begun healing. But to run with the mandate and not communicating, it's hard to watch. And we feel it. And elders feel it. And when you're being subtly attacked, I'm going to scream from the rooftops, now I am, that this subtle system need not survive. It shouldn't survive. Because that's not the Squamish way. Working towards consensus, working towards open dialogue, working lots about one heart, one mind.
Thank you. Okay.